So my parents came as part of the wave of immigrants that came in the 1960s, late 60s, after immigration law and civil rights law were changed to pursue higher education.
I'm African. I'm from North Africa, Algeria. So when I came here, they asked me, why is your first language French? My parents grew up in France, and their first language was France. And when Algeria got the independence, they went back to the country. They didn't know any Arabic, and they raised me in France.
I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. Looks a little different than the Detroit we have today in regards to like the infrastructure, how that looks. There are a lot of things that are kind of closed down.
I was born in Detroit. We lived in Detroit at the time on Metatol.
I grew up in Redford and Detroit, and I grew up in a single mother household.
Everyone who lived around me pretty much looked like me.
Troy is one of the most diverse communities in Michigan.
We moved into an all-white community during the 1971 sort of flight out of the city of Detroit. I was 3 years old, and at the time I didn't realize why we were moving. It was a big change for me. I remember leaving one of my best friends behind. It was a big change. But we moved into a brand new house and a brand new community.
I grew up in a great neighborhood where people helped each other.
It's very comfortable to see, people who have the same color of skin as me around. I know a lot of people might not have that, but I grew up with multiple aspects of my life being comfortable.
School looked a little differently. There was more diversity in regards to having both black and white people, but that was the extent of the diversity.
It's a lot of community. People knew me. People got a lot of acceptance.
I spent many of my childhood years in Long Island, a suburb called Stony Brook, a university town. It's somewhat diverse, a lot of Jewish community, various religious and ethnic groups on college campus that we were involved with. So I grew up with a very diverse understanding of community.
Like my son, he was in kindergarten, and I studied about Africa, and the teacher was talking about the savannah. And he went like 3 times to Africa. We have cars, we have buildings, we have everything. And he came to me in the kitchen and he said, "Mom, you didn't tell me you lived in the savannah." And I was like, come on. So the idea he got, it's like Africa, it's the savannah. And since his mom was African, his father was African, so I don't know what went into his mind, like, Mom lives in the savannah with animal. He made the thing. At school, they didn't know a lot about overseas. When they talk like, oh, you come from overseas, they don't realize how we live. They don't realize how hard it is for us to try to make it work here. They don't. So I said to myself, like, I began to say to myself, let's show them, let's build this bridge, because we don't have, I realized that we don't have bridge between communities. Like at school, we are a community, but at the same time, it's not like we're trying to build bridges, but I don't know how to say it, like each bridge is going its way, but we need to connect.
We moved from the East Coast back to India when I was 15, and I was the other. And it wasn't in a nice way, because I looked like everybody else in India, but I sounded like this. And so people had stereotypes of what an American teenager should do or sound like and behave like, and I didn't always fit all of those, because my parents had raised me with some values of my language, my customs, my religion, and so appreciation for some of the classical arts. And so people were always very surprised that I broke those stereotypes. And sometimes those, their expectation of me otherized me even before I opened my mouth.
There's been a time or two, maybe at work, not my current employer, but being at work and having to always be that person who is always speaking out about something that isn't right.
Sophomore year of high school, the Troy Social Justice Project initiative was started. That's the 4 high schools in Troy. International Academy, Athens, Troy, and Niles, they started an initiative, and we started doing skits and presented them to the different middle schools in Troy, and we would discuss these social issues. I got involved with that as a sophomore, and we're finishing it up this year. But I also do I would do a lot of volunteer work in the temple, in the Bharatiya temple here in Troy. I'm on the executive committee there, and so I think that I really like being out there and doing things for other people.
It goes back to the Boys and Girls Club, and there was a man named Tim Kowalski. And Tim Kowalski was a man who honored every child, and he was a man who valued every child and found something redeeming in every child that came across his path. I'm an ADHD coach. I help ADHD people and some autistic people reach their potential. I have ADHD, and one of the things that I've done in my life is try to use that for benefit. And so I think being ADHD makes me very creative, and I've written 3 books and written chapters in other books, and I think without ADHD I wouldn't be able to do those things.
There weren't a lot of African American students in my high school, it was just a handful. But I was friends with one, and he asked me to go to prom, and I said yes. And I didn't realize that my parents were going to have a very strong opinion about that, and they did, and they shared that with me, and it was very hurtful to me. And I was really afraid that my date was going to know that my parents were not happy. And so it was a very awkward prom because I felt like there was this conversation that we needed to have that I was not capable of having at that time. And it wasn't until I got into college, into this class with this wonderful professor who allowed us to have this really clumsy time understanding issues of race and our place in the world, and how we could possibly reach beyond where we're comfortable and do all of those things. She really did plant some seeds for me that I've sort of been germinating for a long, long time in my lifetime.
I have a son, and I adore him. And I honestly want the world to be the best place that it could be for him. I know that sounds really funny, but if I could take the sun down and hand it to him, I would do that. And part of me trying to, I guess, fix the world, so to speak, is for him to have a place to kind of be. And I also feel like I've been incredibly blessed, and I feel like service is what you owe for those blessings.
Helping other people find their own value and their own sense of self-worth. And I'm just continuing the work that was done on me when I was a kid. You need a sense of humor if you're going to deal with hyperactive children whose agendas are often at great odds with the teacher trying to keep the class on task. So I try to find ways for teacher to value the students who are maybe hard for them to value. I try to help teachers see the gifts where maybe they only see weakness.
When we decided to have children after we got married, my husband and I, we adopted transracially, and so then it became personal. Now my children are of another race, and I needed to know for my family and for myself issues of race, what my children were going to be facing, and what they did face actually early on, much earlier than I thought they were going to have to deal with issues of race. So I would much rather be shunned for being anti-racist than being embraced for a lie that I will go along with it, yeah.
When I was a sophomore in high school, there was a rather effeminate young man. We'll call him Tom. And Tom was bullied, he was tripped, he was chided, he was insulted for the whole of my 10th grade high school year, and it was an all-boys Catholic high school. And I wanted to speak out and to speak out against what was going on, but I didn't. And looking back, I mean, the reason I didn't is very clear, because I was afraid that had I spoken out, then I would become the next object for the scorn and the bullying and the really violence. It was. I mean, he didn't get, hurt extensively, but it was still at its core violence. And he left the school at the end of that year, and you know, here it is over 30 years later, and I still feel guilty. I still feel that I should have done something. And I wonder if anybody else in my class thinks about that. I certainly do.
Years ago in a past life, I used to be in retail management. And I remember working at a particular store. And, you know, I was a manager, I was a store manager, but we also had HR people. And I remember when I took over the store, I was the only pop of color in the store, which was really weird because the store was in Sterling Heights, which is a diverse area. And so I remember saying, you know, the clientele, the customer base doesn't look like that. We need to get some diversity in here. And I remember sitting down with the person who was our HR and was kind of helping me do the hiring. But I remember sitting down with her and we were kind of going over applications, and she said, oh, she didn't want to call this person, didn't call them because, like, oh, they live in those apartments behind there. We don't want people from there. It was an immigrant person. It was, I could tell by the name and some other information when I called them, and that's really what she probably wanted to say, or the fact that she thought that they were poor. Needless to say, I did end up hiring people from there. I didn't let that deter me from doing it. I should have said something, but I had already changed so much that I didn't. That still bothers me.
One of the things I saw after 9/11, people withdrew into their own communities, particularly in Troy, which has such a high diversity. At that time, we had, I think, 1 out of 5 people born in another country. Today, we have 28% of our population born in another country in the city of Troy. And I realized that because of fear, people were withdrawing within their own, and they became even more self-segregated. And so the Islamic community was fearful of being otherized, the Sikh community, and then, you know, within each of the different ethnic groups. And so also I found that the more we had of a particular population, the more that they self-segregated, just because there was enough of them to create a sense of community within their own ethnic subset. And it happens even with African Americans. And I realized that I found a few friends who understood that you needed to cross these lines that we create, these invisible lines that we create to sort of self-segregate ourselves.
The work is putting yourself in a really uncomfortable situation, oftentimes, something that you're not familiar with or you're not prepared for, or you think that you're not going to enjoy, or getting to know someone that you think you probably don't have anything in common with. Making yourself a little bit uncomfortable, living outside of your sort of comfort zone or living outside of your box. Looking for experiences that will push you in that way.
First you try, you come, you think you are different, and you observe what's happening. Then when you know where you are, then you begin to be open. When you understand, you get open to people.
My grandparents had a heavy hand in raising me, and my grandmother is one of those, you know, help everybody, but a kind of behind the scenes kind of person. Like, she would never do this, like sit down and do an interview, but whatever you needed to support the cause, she would be the one behind kind of doing that. And so that combined with my mother's kind of go-getter attitude, I think is kind of what caused that. And really social studies class, being a kid, kind of, that's how I learned about, I hate to use the word other people, but learn about different cultures and different experiences in social studies class, like in elementary.
What we did is organize the multicultural event. It's about, we have a diversity, a big diversity at the school. Like I organized the multicultural event, was at Martel Elementary School. We have a lot of parents from overseas. It was a group work. It was very hard. It took us 3 months, but the result was great. And even now, like, I'm having parents sometimes contacted me, are you going to do it again? Please let us know. And it's awesome when you see the diversity of school. It was great, yeah.
I think my life and my work is an example of how people can use what might be considered liabilities by other people, people can find ways to use them to their advantage.
Oh, for sure. The city council meeting where people were yelling at me about wanting the National Day of Prayer to be inclusive, as opposed to the city of Troy having a National Day of Prayer that was for Christians only. Well, first of all, that's not very Christian. And second of all, some of the people who were there opposing an inclusive perspective were so angry. I was so scared because there was one man in particular that really just, and that's when Richard Peacock, Reverend Richard Peacock, is United Methodist minister in the area for many years. He's retired now, but just having that support from him just was immense.
I know maybe it is like my parents have given me a sense of awareness and to be aware of my surroundings and see what's there.
So even now, even after my kids are growing up, they're becoming young adults, and so we've been, in my family, talking about race for a long time and doing a lot of reading and a lot of discussion and reaching out, and we're still not even close to understanding everything that we need to know to be great parents and good people. So we're always looking for new exercises that teach us and help us grow in regards to understanding race.
My son, like going away to camp. I remember him going to camp and kind of helping kids kind of unpack and get ready. And I remember like one of the kids couldn't eat something related to probably their religious beliefs. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was during Ramadan. So you fast until sundown. And I remember, first of all, the kid having to explain to everybody else why he couldn't, because he must have been 12, because it's usually when it starts. And I could tell, like, he felt uncomfortable having to say that. And I remember having to address the people kind of running the camp and letting them know, like, that wasn't cool, and kind of taking up that crusade that we should have already talked to the kids about it beforehand, so that he wasn't made to feel othered or, oh, that's silly, because you kind of get that kind of response from kids, which is the typical response. That kind of spurred me into action, I guess, to reaching out to others, because I just somehow felt that, like, you know, I kind of felt bad for that kid. I could tell how he felt. And he was, prior to that, he was just another one of the kids. That made him feel othered, and I just felt like it really didn't need to be discussed, or we should have been prepared for having the discussion, and we were not.
It's an easy one. I lived in this house in Ann Arbor. I was going to the University of Michigan, and I had very little money. Like even buying food was a struggle. And I lived with this grad student whose name was Shu. I don't remember Shu's last name, but his English was abysmal. But Shu, in spite of his poor English, quickly deduced that I didn't have a lot of money. And so Shu took it upon himself to feed me. And that's where I learned what real Chinese food was, and he made rice, and he made eggs, and he showed me how to go to different stores and get vegetables on the cheap. And he was just a guy who saw that there was this young guy struggling, and his motivation was, oh, I gotta help this guy, and he did. And I don't know what happened to him, but I'll never forget that.
I was part of like a certain clique, like a lot of these Indian kids. We do a lot of, some of them go to the temple, you know. We make a lot of, we're more similar than some of the other people. But at the beginning of this year, I reached out. I kind of started talking to some other people, some of the kids who are more in the art community, and you know, I think they're pretty socially aware too, and I really like that, because I was able to learn from them and learn from some of their experiences that they've had. And so I think that being able to talk to these new brand of people is just opened my mind a little more.
So there's friends that you make across cultural lines, but for me that was always easy. I mean, meeting people who were not necessarily Indian origin or Telugu, that was not a problem. I think the two that were really important were when I became friends with a couple of Muslims. As a Hindu, racial lines were not the same pretty much because they were both from South Asia originally, or their families were from South Asia. One was an engineer at GM. He was part of the Ethnic Issues Advisory Board. He even ran for city council here in Troy, Amin Hashmi. One of his sons and my son were the same age when we met, and we've seen them grow together over the years. We've shared common concerns because as people of South Asia, we have similar concerns about retaining that balance between the place where we are and the place where we came from. And that was interesting. The other really important divide that I've crossed that I find very valuable is the age divide. Because my parents don't live here, I've met many people who are old enough to be my parents, who have mentored me. There's a gentleman who was the chairperson of the library board for the city of Troy, one of the rare Indians that I found that was involved in Troy's community efforts, whether, a city board, and also with people of other cultures and religions, but being older, and they helped sort of nurture my activism to a better place.
We didn't like it. Like, America always heading first for the war. It was more politics, okay? But when you come here and you discover America, you see the people, it's another world. It has nothing to do with what we see on TV. I was attracted by the values, first, of people here in America, values that I believed in. I loved the family system. Like, everywhere I was going outside, I see parents with their kids, it was more oriented family. I loved it so much. And so we decided to stay because we wanted a good life for our kids.
I'm always nervous when I talk to people who are not a minority. Let's just be frank and say white people, because I'm not sure where they're coming from. Are they going to be repeating the Fox News version of something, or are they going to be repeating the real news? And so that's where I'm pleasantly surprised when I find an ally who understands that being of a minority community means that there is a level of oppression.
When I first got to the Troy School District, my son, he came here as a School of Troy student. And on the form, they ask you to select schools that you want. And I remember the schools that I picked. The first one I know was Morris. It was near where I was working at the time. I know it was kind of diverse. And I thought, I want him at that school. It was a couple other ones that I may have put down, but he wasn't placed there because it's placed based on openings in the district. And they placed them at Hamilton Elementary, which is really on the far north side of Troy, almost really going into Bloomfield. And I remember driving there, this is far, and just kind of getting there how's this gonna feel? And I walked into the office, and I remember being greeted by the secretary, and she was just really nice and chipper, Mrs. Hoffmeister. And I remember thinking, they're probably thinking, what am I doing here? Or I made an assumption about how I felt like I would be perceived by her. But to this day, she's probably one of the nicest people I've ever encountered. I didn't think she would be mean or rude or anything, but she really was just really nice. At the same time, while my son was attending there, I lost my mom, and she was one of the first people to kind of reach out. And she told me she had lost her mom on Christmas Day, and kind of that was something that we shared and we kind of talked about. But every morning she was just always nice, kind, every day. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that kind of warm greeting, especially from someone every day. I had made an assumption of what I thought the reception would be like from her, and it was wrong.
I love martial arts. I'm a senior green belt in Taekwondo.
Most people think I'm a tree hugger, really loony, out there lefty. I'm a pretty fiscal conservative.
I have ADHD, but I also speak 6 foreign languages fluently.
I don't believe in death, actually.
I like to ski. We like to go on ski trips in the wintertime. Sometimes I say that and people are surprised. I don't know why, but.
Be American first. Like you have your religion and you are American. And you are here for our country. How to make the city, because if the city is good, the county is going to be good, the country, work for the country first. Like your country, you are here for your country, you are here, and don't forget your culture, don't forget where you come from, your roots. Like you have your religion, but we have all to work together. We are not different. We are not different. We should reach to each other, live together in peace, and help each other.
You know, a lot of people say our diversity is our strength, but see, and that's a great, catchphrase to say that. But for me, it's not a catchphrase. My life and my work shows that it's actually true.
Smaller communities where we can be more tight-knit, we'll develop the relations that we have amongst each other, and we'll develop our interactions with each other as human beings.
An ideal community probably is one where people are working together to solve the differences. People are looking to create positive engagement out of the difference.
Well, I think we're pretty close to it in Troy, meaning that we have folks who are really interested in this kind of work. I don't think that bias and discrimination is really ever going to leave us, and I don't think that that's ever going away. I think our minds want to categorize people. That's just kind of what we want to do. I think that the answer to that is not to eliminate it, but to constantly work on it, on ourselves personally and as a community. Do the same thing as a community that we do with ourselves personally. When we are sort of have a stereotype in our mind, we try to overcome that. And I think as a community we can do the same things.
It will be one where there's not just diversity and inclusion or tolerance. It would be where everybody is made to feel valued and not just accepted but celebrated. I would want it to be a place where my son is not misunderstood or seen as a threat because of his size, his skin color, or anything like that. And for all of our sons, where they don't have to carry baggage of stereotypes about who they are. Like, I'm Asian, so I have to be the smartest person in the room. Ideally, that's what I would like. And that will be my ideal community. And everybody can just be free to develop and be who they are and not have to worry about any stereotypes or how someone might perceive them. Just be.